Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 SimPilot, and today we're going to take a look at something that's been asked a lot on my channel recently, especially on the streams as well of course, which is what are my Thrustmaster joystick sensitivity settings, and in general what are my settings that I use to fly the Airbus in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So today we're going to look at the key assignments that I use as well as the sensitivity settings I have set up on the joystick and the Thrustmaster throttle quadrant. Hopefully this can help you even if you're not using these exact joysticks. It may give you some insight as to how I've got it set up to get it feeling to pretty much how I like it. It's not absolutely perfect yet and things do change a lot, but I haven't had to change the sensitivity settings for a little while now, so hopefully these will work for you as well. I'll talk about which version of the mod I have installed as well, as that's going to be very important. We're going to do a short flight from here in Lyon over to Geneva just to demonstrate some of the points I want to make. Right, let's get started. So we are about to take off from Lyon, and what I want to say first of all is the version of the mod I am using is the custom fly-by-wire version. It is the experimental version, as you can see here. Now it is the one installed. Obviously with Microsoft Flight Simulator open it doesn't let you change that, but there we go, custom fly-by-wire. Even when I update to the sort of development version that isn't available on the installer yet for the autopilot, that doesn't change my sensitivity settings. That's just the autopilot that changes. So this is by far my favorite version because it handles so much better, the experimental custom fly-by-wire version. It tends to get the same features as the development version, just it gets them slightly later by, you know, a few hours or a day or so, but it's well worth it. This version includes so many new features, which I'm going to talk about with you now. We've got obviously the fact that it has the rotate law for takeoff, it has improved handling for pitching, it has improved roll, it all handles so much more like the real aircraft, and it starts to feel like an actual Airbus when you use the custom fly-by-wire system. They've done an amazing job. As you can see from the GitHub page which talks about it, it's got all sorts of different things as well, and lots of fixes for problems that came up with the original A320 NEO flight control system in the flight simulator. So yeah, custom fly-by-wire is the version I'm using. Now, if you do use this version, the next thing to note is you need to go to the page. I'm going to put a link in the description, the documentation for this system. And if you are using the Thrustmaster TCA Airbus Officer Pack, like I am, and in particular if you're using the throttle quadrant, then you'll need to go and follow the instructions for the throttle configuration. I did this, I only had to do it once. It's worked. Even when I change version, it still works as long as you stay in the custom fly-by-wire version. If you go back to the older versions, or sorry, not the older versions, but the stable or the development version, then you'll need to readjust. But as long as you stay in the custom fly-by-wire, and really there's no reason you shouldn't, if you're happy to take the risk of some bugs, and there are the risk of bugs, obviously it is an experimental version, but if you're happy with that risk like I am, then you won't have to fiddle around too much. And in here, it's going to guide you through the configuration setup, and it gives you some text that you need to copy into a file. It's all very simple. You don't need any different applications. You just got to carefully follow the instructions. Obviously, fly-by-wire, nor me, will take any responsibility for any problems. It's at your own risk, but I followed that carefully and didn't have any trouble with it, and it helped set it up so that the reverser detents worked. Now when you are on the page and you're looking for the text to copy in, it gives you lots of different options. So what I'm going to do on the screen now is just show you the option that I have set up. This is the text file that I ended up using to make it work with my custom fly-by-wire version. So that's just to help hopefully make it a bit simpler for you guys, because there are a lot of different options in there, but that's the one that worked for me. It gives me the reverser detents and the throttle axis working really nicely. If you're using the older versions, or the versions without the custom fly-by-wire, the development or the stable mainline versions, then the default sensitivity it comes with should be absolutely fine on the thrust levers. As long as you go to the Thrustmaster website and download the correct software, then it will work for you. So just follow the instructions that came with it. But if you're using the custom fly-by-wire, you need to go and follow the instructions that fly-by-wire team give you. Okay, so I have a video out about the rotate law, which is what's going to be particularly relevant today. So how do I make the rotate law work and feel like I should? Well, fly-by-wire recommend that you have a linear sensitivity. So I'll show you that now. So if I go to my controls and then select on, not rudder pedals. I'm on the TCA A320 Copilot. Then I click on sensitivity. You'll see that my pitch, so there's my pitch, which is the y-axis, and my roll are completely linear. So sensitivity 0 on minus and plus. Dead zone, I have a little dead zone. It's just worth having, just because there are some bugs and glitches you could trigger, so it's worth having a dead zone. For example, if the autopilot's in and you don't realize there's a slight input, it could cause you issues later on. So a little bit of a dead zone. Neutral is at 0, extremity dead zone's at 0, reactivity 100%. And there we go. And that's all I've got set there. We'll talk more about assignments once we're in the air, but I also have flight rudder pedals set up, and I use these with all my different aircraft. And as you can see, sensitivity on that is actually, I've made it slightly different. So those two on the left, the X and Y, this is my toe brakes. But so they don't actually, I should get rid of those dead zones. There we go. It's good to find this stuff out. But the sensitivity on my Z axis, I have set to this curve, and that is the same on my joystick. So that's there. If I go to the Copilot sensitivity, my joystick has the same sort of curve, and this curve is minus 50 plus. Sorry, 50% sensitivity for both minus and plus, a bit of a dead zone again, and the rest is, as you can see, 0% neutral, 0% extremity dead zone, and 100% reactivity. The reason is there is still an issue. It's not fly-by-wire's fault. It's Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's too grippy, and I thought they'd updated it, but it still feels pretty similar to me. And the problem with that is on takeoff and on the ground, you get a weird effect where the nose wheel grips like it's on rails, and it just drives around in a way that the real aircraft just doesn't. The handling of it is not quite there. So that's why I have that curve set. I find that makes it much more manageable. So I can use the rudder pedals closer, not exactly as I would, but closer to real life. And then you still have that travel if you need to go to full rudder. It is available to you. And that's what I use. I'm using the Logitech SideTech pedals. So that is what we need for the takeoff. So let's get into the air. I'm going to release the parking brake. And 50% N1. 2 clicks forwards. Away we go. Manflex 55, SRS runway, auto thrust is blue and armed. Off we go. So as we talked about, slightly reduced sensitivity on the rudder means I can use just the small bits of control I need up to 100 knots. There we go. And to keep it straight on the runway. If you have any more or linear sensitivity, it tends to be too much. There's the rotate law, so that's easy. Pitching, just holding the joystick with a little bit of squeeze and then letting go as it reaches its desired pitch. So if I disconnect the autopilot, I can show you just a recap. We have a bit of sensitivity curve on the rudder pedals. That seems to work best, especially for the takeoff. And we have linear sensitivity, so straight lines on the side stick, which gives it a really nice feel. It handles not too sluggish, not too responsive. Again, all using the custom fly-by-wire system. So I highly recommend following the fly-by-wire advice for both the pitch and roll axes, because I think it works really well. So now we're in the air, let's look at the key assignments. So what do I use? So if I go to controls, let's start with the joystick, set to the default profile, but I've changed quite a lot of things around. So it's quite a lot to talk about here, a bit more than you would expect, but here we go. I've got Avionics Master 1 on, set to button 9. This is purely because I use a radio panel, so I need to press that to turn on the radio panel when I'm starting the airplane from cold and dark. I use button 16 to change between the external and internal mode. I've set the cockpit look around to the hat switch, of course, and then the external look around to the hat switch. So both of those are set. And I don't have the lock. This is just captain look up, look left, etc. Sorry, cockpit look up, look left. Autopilot, this is quite important. I've got my joystick set up as you can see in this picture. So I've got the toggle autopilot master on button 3, which is there on the left, which is the red button. That is the autopilot disconnect in the real aircraft. And I've got the toggle flight director to button 11 and 12. The reason I have it assigned to both of those is in X-Plane, I have the same or similar assignments. And in X-Plane, I can use this for flight director 1 and flight director 2. Now, we always turn them on and off together, but it's still nice to have the option. But here we go. So in Microsoft Flight Simulator, I just have them assigned to either. As I said, when we do non-precision approaches, then we turn off the flight directors when we're not using them. So it's important to have quick access to those flight directors, and it's handy to be able to turn them both off without having to look around the flight deck to lean over to the other side. Brakes are assigned to button 7. That's just a backup in case my toe brakes don't behave or something like that while I'm streaming. I'm always paranoid about that. Flight control surfaces, as we said, here we go. Aileron axis, linear and not reversed. Elevator axis, linear. And rudder axis does have a sensitivity curve assigned to it. So you can see that last bit is more sensitive, but the middle I can tune more finely. Then I assigned this little throttle, which does have a detent, which I can never feel on mine, to be honest with you. I never know where it is there. Some people say it's there, but mine doesn't seem to have it almost at all. It does register the button, but you just can't feel it. So I don't know how you could use that as a reverser. But there we go. So spoilers, and I had to reverse it, of course. So fully forwards, I use it for the spoilers retracted and then deploy like that. Now, most of the flight is obviously stowed like that, and then I can still arm them and so on as usual, and they still deploy on landing even though I have them assigned here. Flaps I have set to 5 and 10, which are these two on the left. That's decreased by 1 notch and increased by 1 notch. It seems to work fine. Obviously I don't have the throttle quadrant add-on. For trimming, I use button 2 on the front of the joystick just above the trigger, which I didn't know existed until after I unboxed it and played around for a little bit. And elevator trim up I've got set to that other one. Now, we don't need these in the Airbus almost ever, but I have them there because, firstly, there is a possibility you could need them, especially if we start to see some of the failures implemented in this mod. But also, I fly other aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator as well, so it's nice to just not forget where they are. So that's what I use those two for. Landing gear is available button 8, but I don't actually use that, and I'll tell you why later. And I've got a VR toolbar. When I use VR, I need it available. So that's it. That's what I've got assigned onto this. There's a few more buttons spare, which I could think of things to do with, but at the moment that seems to be working just fine. So that's my assignments. Next will be on the throttle quadrant, so the TCA. I have several profiles for this. I have this profile, which is specifically set up for the A32NX, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. That's probably what most of you are here for. As I said, I followed those instructions on the GitHub page to make this work. So let's go to sensitivity, and here you can see it's linear, unbelievably. And as I move my throttles through the full motion, it goes up and down. But it's all pretty straightforward. But it works because of that file put into the flight simulator. So yeah, it's really good. The rest of these axes don't work because I don't have the add-on, so you can ignore all of those. It's just the X and Y you're looking at, and it's just a line like that. But that is because I used that document. So nothing much to say there. In terms of setup then, most of these are default actually. It came out of the box working quite well in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I was quite impressed. But what did happen was, you can see there, I've got the throttles have to be reversed to make them work. We've got landing gear toggle on button 5. That button, it's not button in real life, it's just a light, so it doesn't really matter. So I've assigned that to the landing gear toggle. These gear assignments aren't actually there because I don't have the little gear lever. Same for the rudder trim, you can ignore all of that. And I have a toggle parking brake set to number 6 on the right, which is really quite useful. The engine masters are set. Engine master 1 and 2 are there. They are set by default to 3 and 4, of course, which is where you'd want them. And you've got the engine mode select to crank, ignition, and set to norm, which is quite clever how that works. It's 7 and 8 because it's one of those is as it comes from one side and then the other from the other side, and then it's clever. It does work well. Then I've got the automatics somewhere here. Autopilot arm auto throttle is the command for button 1 and 2, but that works equally well for disconnecting, it seems. So that just came out of the box like that, and that's those little red buttons, which in the real Airbus are auto thrust disconnect buttons. They're called the instinctive auto thrust disconnect buttons, but there you go. So they work really well. And that's it, really. There's not a whole lot else to say. That's what I use for the thrust levers and the assignments. So pretty much all as you'd expect, except I have landing gear to button 5 and parking brake to button 6. And as you can see, by doing that, let me take out the auto thrusts, which is off, there we go, and there's idle, climb, flex, toga, all works exactly as it should, and I get a reasonable sensitivity in this middle range here. Not as good as the real aircraft. On my little TCA quadrant there's not as much travel, but still it's good enough. It works, and I've flown manual thrust approaches with it, and that's fine. When I fly other aircraft, I take out the detents and it works just fine for that as well, and you get more motion, of course. So yeah, all very good and absolutely fine for reverse, which obviously won't work in flight, but you get really nice control of the reverses. One thing I'll say about the auto thrust disconnect, it says auto thrust arm. You can't arm the auto thrust using these little buttons in the real aircraft. It only disconnects, but for some reason it comes with the arm option, so you can actually press them to turn it off and on, like that, which is a bit unrealistic, but there we go. It works. Same for the autopilot disconnect. The button I have for it turns it off, and then I can press it again and it turns it on. It doesn't work in the real airplane. You can't use that to turn on the autopilot. It only disconnects it, for obvious reasons. So that's all for today's video. I hope it's been useful for you. I get asked that question a lot, and I completely understand why, and that's the current settings I use that I think feel the best for this simulator. As I said, you've got to use the custom fly-by-wire version, which does come with its own risks. They are for you to decide if you're happy to take those risks, but if you do use the custom fly-by-wire system, then you can follow the instructions and it will work out for you. The team have done a great job with the rotate law and the custom fly-by-wire in flight, so it really starts to feel like the actual aircraft, or much closer to it than it ever did before with the default Microsoft system. There'll be plenty more videos on the channel, more tutorials and live streams coming soon, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. Otherwise, keep very safe and well. We'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Thank you. Bye bye.